A few years ago, a meme that loomed large in popular culture was the belief that the world would end on December 21st, 2012. This belief was based on the great calendar of the vanished Mayan civilization, which ended that particular winter solstice. Plainly, our world didn't end that day. But until the date came and went without disaster, you could scarcely dodge programs online or on television telling the story of the Mayan calendar's predictions of the end of the world. I didn't put any stock into the world ending just then because a Mayan calendar ended, no more than I'd believe the world would end on December 31st, just because the calendar on my wall ends then. But this meme raised public awareness about the possibility of cycles repeated over vast stretches of time. The Mayan calendar described a great cycle lasting 5,125 years, constituting an age of their history. Attention to such long spans of time isn't unique to long-dead civilizations. Geologists also divide the history of the Earth into an entire hierarchy of time spans, variously classified into eons, eras, periods, epochs, and ages. The Zodiac also contains a repeating cycle of time periods called Astrological Ages. The science of astronomy that grew out of the older study of astrology has verified this endless cycle of recurring ages unfolding over many thousands of years. Astronomers concern themselves with a rational explanation for this cycle, but to astrologers, this cycle defines a turning wheel of time imbued with deep meaning. In this edition of the Temporal Reverie, I want to consider astronomical indications that the Earth is due to transition from one astrological age to the next. What's the significance of these astrological ages, especially the one we are leaving and the one we will enter next? In exploring answers to that question, we'll look at evidence that the tale of these ages is actually woven into the Bible. To understand the significance of astrological ages, it's important to understand the real astronomical behavior that defines them. The first thing to remember in this regard are 4 dates in our calendar that herald the changing of the seasons. These 4 dates are the first day of spring on March 21st, the first day of summer on June 21st, the first day of autumn on September 21st, and the first day of winter on December 21st. While these dates are typically associated with the start of the 4 seasons, they are also closely tied to the changing length of day and night throughout the year. Let's take a spin around the sun to see what I mean. The first of these 4 dates is the longest night of the year, which takes place on December 21st. This date is the winter solstice. After the winter solstice, the nights are still longer than the days, but the days continue to grow steadily longer. On March 21st, both the gradually lengthening day and the shortening night reach a point when day and night are equal in length. This date is the vernal or spring equinox. Following the vernal equinox, the days are now longer than the nights and continuing to get even longer. 3 months after the vernal equinox, June 21st brings the longest day of the year, called the summer solstice. After the summer solstice, the days still outlast the nights, but those daylight hours get shorter and shorter. 3 months after the summer solstice, the autumnal equinox arrives on September 21st, when day and night are again of equal length. The nights then become longer again on their way to the next winter solstice. Stargazers have long compiled careful, detailed records of the positions of the stars in the sky throughout this annual cycle of solstices and equinoxes. The zodiac has a normal forward direction as each sign passes through our skies over the course of a year. Because it takes the zodiac a year to cycle through all 12 signs, you might be tempted to think that 1 year from now, the same stars will reappear in exactly the spot they held 1 year before. But they don't reappear exactly where you found them 1 year before. What all but the observation and charting done by astrologers then astronomers revealed is the locations of the zodiac constellations observed on the same date from 1 year to the next, say on the vernal equinox, appear to slide slowly backward in the reverse of the normal direction of the zodiac. At first, that observation sounds puzzling. How can the constellations move faithfully forward from one night to the next, but also appear to slide backward when seen on the same date from 1 year to the next? As the constellations of the zodiac slide forward in their normal direction and speed, the return of any particular constellation around the 360-degree lap of the zodiac falls slightly short of the spot it held 1 year previously. Like a watch with a minute hand that falls a few seconds behind each minute, with each year, the zodiac falls a very small amount behind its position from the previous year. Observed over a number of years at the same date and location, this shortfall gradually moves one sign out of the center stage of the sky and lets another drift into the limelight. In fact, if you return to the same spot on the vernal equinox and charted the constellations every night, this slow backward drift would eventually bring the same stars into the position that you charted on your very first night. But you'd better be prepared to live a very long time. To come full circle again, this backward cycle takes 26,000 years. In the astrology of the zodiac, this 26,000-year cycle has a name. It's called the Great Year, no doubt because, like our calendar year, it's divided into 12 segments. The segments of the Great Year are the Astrological Ages, each age defined by the period when one zodiac sign dominates the sky of the vernal equinox. Dividing 26,000 years by 12 ages tells us the average length of each astrological age is 2,160 years. That number is an average because while the 12 months of our calendar year are pretty close to equal in length, the constellations of the zodiac are not spaced evenly around their circle. Some signs are closer together, while others have wider gaps separating them. Consequently, some astrological ages are longer than others. The seeming backward movement of the zodiac signs is a verifiable fact of the observed universe. But what causes it to happen? One factor is the 23.5-degree tilt of the Earth's rotational axis. No doubt a lot of people imagine the Earth spinning like this, when it actually spins like this. The other factor is the shape of the Earth. The Earth is typically shown as a perfect sphere when it's not perfectly spherical. The actual shape of the Earth is slightly squished between the north and south poles, bulging a little at the equator. Taken together, the Earth's tilted spin axis, along with its bulge at the equator, causes the Earth's gravitational mass to be out of alignment as it moves through the solar system. The gravitational poles of the Sun, the Moon, Jupiter, and other planets try to wrestle the Earth's mass into the same plane they occupy, the ecliptic. While the effect fails to bring the tilted Earth into line, the gravitational forces cause the spin axis of the Earth to wobble. The pull of gravity from these neighbors on the Earth disturbs the planet's spin in a very particular way called axial precession. In this case, axial simply refers to a disturbance in the planet's spin axis. This type of disturbance is called precession. Chances are you haven't heard the word precession very much, especially compared to its opposite, precession. A precession moves its members forward in an expected order, but a precession moves everything in the opposite order. Because this particular precession is observable at the spring equinox, this particular motion is called the precession of the equinoxes. The significance of these astrological ages is that the traits commonly associated with each zodiac sign expresses themselves as powerful influences that significantly color and influence human civilization across the entire time of that age. As the great year unfolds, the arrival and eventual departure of one zodiac constellation after another imparts their individual energies to the people, events, and institutions operating under the dominance of the reigning sign. Each age is named and characterized by the zodiac sign that appears across those years of human history. While this idea may sound new to you, there's a good chance you've encountered it before without realizing what you were hearing. In 1967, the tribal love rock musical Hair premiered and took the public by storm. The lyrics of one of the most popular songs from this show mentions a new astrological age on the way. When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, then peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Humanity nears the dawn of a new astrological age, an age dominated by the energy and the thinking of Aquarius. But if we find approaching the start of a new astrological age, we must also find ourselves at the end of the age coming to a close. The zodiac sign of Aquarius normally appears before Pisces, but in the precession of the equinoxes, Aquarius follows Pisces. So the dawning of the age of Aquarius is also the dusk of the age of Pisces that preceded it. The current age of Pisces began approximately 100 BC and will come to its full end sometime around 2500 AD for a total of 2,592 years. The age of Aquarius to follow will run until about 4400 AD, lasting for 1872 years. So while the age of Aquarius is on the way, none of us will still be alive to greet it. Perhaps what is most interesting about this narrative of astrological ages is that you can find it expressed in the Bible. To find evidence of this in the Bible, you need to peer across the great sweep of history it describes, noting the dominant symbols associated with the greatest characters in both Old and New Testaments, characters who also brought new ideas and ways into being in the ages they opened for humanity. Moses was believed to have lived from 1393 to 1273 BC. He's widely known for the Ten Commandments, which he received inscribed on 2 stone tablets carved by God. The journey Moses makes up Mount Sinai to receive God's laws begins after leading the former Hebrew slaves out of Egypt. The fact that the Jews were about to receive commandments from God they had never heard before is itself indication of a new age for the freed Hebrew nation. As the one called by God to convey his commandments, Moses serves as God's intermediary to guide his people to a new life under God's divine law. But in time, when Moses left his people to await his audience with God and receive the commandments, trouble developed. Impatient to receive these new laws, and perhaps hesitant to undertake any changes these laws might demand, the people began to fall back on old ways and familiar practices. They even undertake building an idol to worship in the form of a golden calf and emulate the polytheistic worship common in Egypt. Exodus 32:19 says, "And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh upon the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot." When Moses finally returns with the Ten Commandments, he is confronted with behavior that violates the prohibitions and requirements God expects his children to follow. God's new law is broken before his children even hear it. But what most people don't realize about Moses' rage is that in no small measure the offense before God was a rejection of the values of the new age that was dawning, so that people could turn back to the ways of the age that was closing. When God spoke to Moses from the form of a burning bush, Moses had become a shepherd tending flocks for one of the regional sheiks. If Moses was the guide to a new astrological age, what age might we suppose he represents? Is there a zodiac sign whose symbol is related at all to sheep? How about Aries, the sign of the ram? The years in which Moses was thought to have lived are fairly early in the age of Aries, an age that in spiritual terms brought the rise of monotheism. And the recalcitrant Jewish people who resorted to the idolatry they saw in Egypt, what symbol is associated with their sins? The golden calf, which we presume might be a male calf, a young bull. And the zodiac sign affiliated with the bull is Taurus. In the precession of the equinoxes, the astrological age of Taurus is followed by the age of Aries. Moses brought the Ten Commandments to his people, ushering in a new age guided by divine law and monotheistic religion. The narrative of Moses, clashed with his wayward people, also tells a less obvious tale of the transition between the closing age of Taurus and the dawning age of Aries. The age of Taurus lasted about 2,592 years, from 4500 BC to 1900 BC. The Age of Aries began around 1900 BC and came to an end around 100 BC for a total of 1800 years. Moses is not the only major biblical figure to bring a new age to humankind in ways both simultaneously overt and subtle. For Christians, the one human in the Bible of greater significance than Moses is Jesus Christ. The ministry of Jesus introduced a new understanding of relationship between God and humanity that was so profound it gave rise to a new religion and an entirely new body of Scripture, the New Testament. A new age indeed. While those threatened by the gospel Jesus preached sought to silence it by executing him, the real revolution would span a dawning new age in the great year. Moses introduced an age of Aries that would come to an end with the arrival of an age governed by the next zodiac sign in the precession of the Equinoxes, an age of Pisces. Although the birth of Jesus Christ is celebrated today on December 25th, that was almost certainly not the actual birthday of Jesus. We don't really know the exact date, but history tells us our current Christmas holiday was set in late December as a means for the Catholic Church to convert European pagans by giving them a holiday to replace their celebrations of the winter solstice. Christmas isn't near the winter solstice by coincidence. It seems much more likely that Jesus was born under the zodiac sign that will lend its qualities and traits to the dawning age of Pisces. Symbolically, the Jesus narrative is punctuated by one particular image that recurs over and over in the Gospels. That symbol is the fish, which is also the symbol of the sign of Pisces. Fish is an element in several of the miracles performed by Jesus. There are stories of 2 different miraculous catches of fish, so large they nearly capsized the boats of the fishers. Another story has a coin appearing in a fish's mouth. Then there's Jesus feeding a crowd of hundreds who had come to hear him preach by multiplying a few fishes and loaves of bread. In the book of Mark, Jesus calls out to prospective disciples, saying to them, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." He also compares the 3 days and nights he will spend dead and buried in a tomb to the 3 days and nights Jonah spent in the belly of a great fish. The fish symbolism is so closely associated with Jesus Christ that 2,000 years after he walked the earth, many believers identify themselves openly with the same simple outline of a fish that early believers used to secretly identify themselves to one another in order to avoid persecution. As a divine incarnation, Jesus Christ served as an intermediary between human beings and God, uniquely positioned by his simultaneous divine and human nature to bridge the consciousness of God to human consciousness. Such a role is very much in keeping with the qualities of Pisceans. Contemporary astrologer Christopher Witecki of SoulGarden.tv frequently describes Piscean individuals as highly attuned to divine consciousness, so much so that he calls them the people who channel God for the other zodiac signs. It is very much in character for a Pisces to develop strong interests and abilities in spiritual matters. Central to the mission of Christ on earth is being the spiritual advocate on behalf of humanity before God. Such a mission is a distinctly Piscean thing to do. Pisceans are also described as the magicians of the zodiac. Miracles are magic by another name. So the power of the enlightened Jesus the Christ to produce miracles is also emblematic of the mystical, magical power of Pisces. Pisceans also typically have a very strong and developed sense of empathy. This heightened ability to mentally inhabit other struggles, suffering, and hardships is at the core of Jesus' ministry. It's this powerful empathy that informs the golden rule taught by Jesus, as well as his imperative of service, that we care for the least of these with the same affection and attention we would offer to Christ. Yet another common attribute of those born under the sign of Pisces is a marked resistance to regimentation, rules, or orthodoxy imposed by others. It's inherent in the Piscean nature to color their lives outside the lines, even if they're perfectly capable of remaining within boundaries drawn by others. They are quite willing and able to speak truth to power, as well as act on what they know to be right without regard for convention or law. Throughout the Gospels are examples of how Jesus' iconoclastic ways brought him into conflict with the prevailing religious orthodoxy of his time. Jesus had no patience for those who zealously insisted on slavish compliance with Jewish laws, even when it allowed human suffering to go unaided. In Matthew chapter 12, the Pharisees scolded Jesus for allowing his disciples to pick and eat from nearby fields on the Sabbath. Jesus rebukes them for small-mindedness, saying, "What man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, he will not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much better then is a man than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days." Jesus himself taught his followers to recognize the character of people according to the character of their actions and deeds, which he called the fruits they bear. As he also said in Matthew, "Wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them." By that reckoning, it seems plain to me that Jesus was a Pisces. So about 2,000 years ago, Jesus was born and grew, and eventually was raised by God to Christ consciousness to begin his ministry. While many people, certainly myself among them, wish that the centuries since the time of Jesus had produced more of the healing, more of the peace, more of the passion and forgiveness that Christ exemplified, one way or another, the way that Jesus made a powerful impression on human history in this age of Pisces came in the emergence of Christianity as a religion distinct from Judaism. The new Christian religion grew and spread well past the confines of Palestine. It became the state religion of the Roman Empire, who then undertook spreading it to the rest of Europe. It's a religion that has taken root in every continent of the earth, bringing billions of believers into its fold, making it the single largest religion on the planet. But even during the time of Jesus, he knew the dawning age of Pisces would eventually wane and give way to the age that must follow, the age of Aquarius. Jesus even told his disciples as much before the Last Supper, as described in the Gospel of Luke. After arriving for Passover in Jerusalem, Jesus sends Peter and John to make the necessary preparations. They ask Jesus what he would have them do in preparation. He tells them, "As you enter the city, a man carrying water will meet you. Follow him into the house he enters." This was an unusual thing for Jesus to say, since the labor of fetching and carrying water was typically done by women. To the ears of his disciples, the idea that they should look for a man carrying water would be strange. But the symbol of a man carrying an urn of water, like the ram symbol of Aries associated with Moses and the fish symbol of Pisces associated with Jesus, is also found in the signs of the Zodiac. It's the symbol for the sign of Aquarius, called the water bearer. Jesus tells his disciples to look for the arrival of Aquarius and then to follow them into his house, another word used in astrology. Does the arrival of an age of Aquarius as our age of Pisces reaches an end mean that the teaching, the message, the values of Christ consciousness are also on the wane? It's noteworthy that in recent years, article after article has appeared to document the shrinking numbers of people engaged in any religious practice, including Christianity. At the same time, pan-spiritualism, which seeks to honor and draw life guidance from multiple faith traditions together, is finding a growing audience. After 2 millennia of ascendancy and dominance, the Christian religion finds itself less appealing, compelling, and satisfying to younger generations. While the arrival of an age of Aquarius does not necessarily signal irrelevance of the gospel or the obsolescence of Christian faith, I do think it's at least possible that the Christian theology, Christian institutions, church leadership, and Christian worship practice are due for a time of prayerful reconsideration. The spirit of the sign of Aquarius is one that is open to new ideas, new ways to seek connection to the divine, new narratives that may invigorate the capacity of Christianity to inspire us in pilgrimage to God, to guide us in deeper understanding of how the 2 commandments given by Christ can become first principles in the way we live our lives, and to challenge both our moral courage and our vision. The greatest promise of the arriving age of Aquarius is an openness to new ideas about the form and the details of our spiritual lives, a willingness to bring new points of view to matters of theology, and the application of thoughtful intention to do more than merely stave off the decline of Christianity. Its curiosity about things untried and unconsidered might infuse the Christian faith with vital new energy. It might provide the Christian world an opportunity to conduct prayerful dialogue about releasing old dogma that comes between people and the light of God. Those of us who travel the Christian path, embracing its narrative as the most desirable way toward reunion with the divine, must engage with one another to bring salvation to Christianity itself. We must speak from love to others in our community whose insistence on literal interpretation of Scripture results in public positions that discredit our faith by the way they assert so-called truths, in direct contradiction to waves of scientific reasoning and empirical evidence. While Episcopal Bishop John Shelby Spong and I may not see all of the particulars in the same way, he makes a compelling case in his book of the same title as to why Christianity must change or die. I submit that Christianity must do more than change, do more than tinker with small concessions to science or offer reluctant olive branches to modernity. It must subject itself to a process of significant reinvention if it is to regain the credibility it has steadily been losing, and restore relevance in danger of being washed away by the tides of unrelenting social and technological change, a flood whose waters we might best contain in vessels coming to us on the shoulders of Aquarius. Next time on the Temporal Reverie, I want to consider how the material of pure consciousness coalesces around our bodies in a localized cloud of being. But how is that localized consciousness, which exchanges information and experience with the divine mind, organized? One very compelling prospect comes from outside the Judeo-Christian tradition, spinning whirlpools of being called chakras. We know from the experience of our lives that the way our Earth turns on its axis as it orbits our Sun produces the steady rhythms and cycles of our lives, the unbroken alternating turns of day and night that regulate the patterns of rest and activity filling our days, the unwinding of the 4 seasons whose cycles mark the passage of year after year, the repeating phases of the moon. We know these cycles because we see their patterns appear and repeat within the spans of our lives. But there are other cycles we almost never notice, because they complete their course over centuries. But here and now, approaching the end of the age, inspired by new stars, we are invited to chart new courses for ourselves, our communities, and our world. I'd like to know what you think about this episode. Please leave any thoughts or questions you want to share in the comments below. My thanks to God for this chance to share with all of you, and may the gifts of love, joy, peace, and enlightenment come to you all.